Welcome to the Heroes of Fantasy Football podcast with your hosts, Matt Heye, Richie Kopech, and Joe Capozzi. Welcome to the lair.
And welcome back to another episode of the Heroes of Fantasy Football podcast. I will be your host tonight, Joe. We are joined by Matt Heye and the one and only Warren Weber, part of our Heroes of Fantasy Football Dynasty League. Yep. So welcome in. Excited to have you on.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Some hot takes over there in Ohio. Big Browns fan over there, so new perspectives. Mm-hmm. But we'll dive right into it. We'll start with the quick question of the day, which is, what is the one thing you wish you knew going into the 2023 season from a dynasty perspective? So we'll start with you, Warren. What's your one thing you wanted to know?
So for me, being a Jameson Williams owner, I would have liked to have known how trash he was going to be. Obviously, last year didn't play till the end of the season because of the torn ACL. Then he gets suspended for the first 4 games of the season because of gambling. And since he's come back, he's played 4 games, I believe, and hasn't gone over a 50% snap count at all in those first 4 games. And then on top of that, they just traded for Donovan Peoples-Jones, so I expect that possibly to go down, maybe a little bit. So yeah, it's just been a disaster for him. And I took him with my 8th pick.
You took him pretty early in our rookie draft.
Yeah,
I know we made a trade. That was part of our 3-way trade between the 3 of us, and then I think you and me made another trade afterwards. Because I that's the draft I got Olave in.
Yeah.
So
yep.
Yeah, you took Jameson Williams with the 1.8.
Yeah, the 8th pick.
Yeah,
so yeah,
sad.
kind of wishing I would have traded him right about now for some stuff, but yeah,
it's fair enough.
Weird.
Yeah, he is not doing what I thought. I thought he was going to be a great stash when you took him. I'm like, that's a great play. When he comes back, he'll be good. And then he's like, well, I'd be gamble on some games, and
it's just it was 6 games, and then they reduced it to 4. So I guess it could have been worse. But
maybe one day he'll get good.
Maybe next year.
We'll see. Matt, what about you? What's your one thing you wish you knew from a dynasty perspective?
So, for those that don't know, so we've been doing this Dynasty League. I think we're in our 5th season this year, actually. I had a good team for the first couple of years, and then I lost to Richie a couple of years ago. Hey, I was in the finals 3 years in a row. All right,
Fitzpatrick.
It was hey, it's magic. Man,
magic.
That was a fun week. But I decided to tear it down. Basically, traded away all of my good players and just went full into a rebuild. And this year was supposed to be my year 2 of a rebuild. And then going into it, I had Anthony Richardson, Ryan Tannehill, and CJ Stroud. Had I known that CJ Stroud was going to start off as hot as he did, I would have made some different moves as far as trading, and I would have gone a little more win now early. Now it's to the point where I threw all of my chips into this year, and I have no draft capital, essentially, no first-round draft capital for the next 3 seasons. So I kind of shot myself in the foot a little bit. I know you're laughing over there because you warned me against it, but I saw the writing on the wall.
Three years in a row you traded your first-round draft picks for. That's
yes, but some of the trades I made. So the last trade probably wasn't.
I don't think it's good enough to not have a first-round pick for 3 years.
I have enough youth and all to trade players if I need to. That's going to be the part that's going to be hard. But I still like my team. I have a lot of good wide receivers that are young, that should be up and coming. I traded Jordan Addison for Jordan Addison from you. I have JSN, Quentin Johnston, but we won't talk about that, and a couple other people. So I'm confident. It just depends on how it goes. What about you, though?
You also have Tank Bigsby.
Tank Bigsby?
Thank you for
you try to sell him to everyone in the league. If anyone out there wants Tank Bigsby, you just message Matt.
I'm your man. I also got Jacques Charbonnet. We'll see. He might be brought up in a little bit later, but we'll talk about that. What about you, Joe?
Let's see. Outside of J.K. Dobbins dying minutes into his first game after I traded for him, uh, my other thing I wish I knew was how disappointing of a season Najee was going to have. I would have sold him high before the season started. First of all, I thought I was going to be a contender this year. Clearly, I was very mistaken, as I am in last place. But just the thought, I didn't think Najee was going to have as bad of a year as he had. I don't know if you guys saw Le'Veon Bell on he was on the Not Just Football with Cam Hayward, and he was saying that he thinks Najee is a good player. His exact words are, sometimes it's just the extra step that's all you need to take a run from 2 yards to about 9, just barely squeeze through that hole. He's talking about Najee needs to lose weight. So maybe he is now the new Fat Lenny. Also, I don't know if you guys have seen the picture of Leonard Fournette at practice. I would like to personally apologize to him. He looks like an animal. His quads are insane. His hamstrings are bigger than my entire body, probably. He looks like a monster right now. So I'm excited to see what shape he's in when they play.
We'll see.
Well, I
I
mean,
don't know what they're gonna do.
I think he's gonna be good. We'll see. But if Richie, if you're watching, I'm sorry. He's no longer Fat Lenny. He's now hamstring Lenny.
He heard all the jokes, man.
He
heard them.
did. But
he was sad because we kept bragging on him. So now he's like, "Oh, let me get in shape."
Yeah, you told me that. But so our episode today, we're going to talk about Dynasty Trade Targets. These are players that we think you should be going out of your way to acquire, whether they're win now candidates or hold candidates. These are players that we think you should have rostered on your team. I'll lead us off. My number one trade target for Dynasty, Khalil Shakir, wide receiver on the Buffalo Bills. He is for me, he's a buy and hold candidate. He's getting more and more snaps. Just last week, he saw a 65% snap share. So he's clearly getting more involved. The Bills have the fourth least amount of cap space in the league, and they are pretty bad in the hole. So I don't see them paying Gabe Davis after this year. So that's only going to make Khalil Shakir's role increase. He looks good. He's getting more. Obviously, the Bills coaching staff trusts him as he's getting more and more involved. You could get him for a third and maybe like something a little else. I got him in our league just recently. I traded a 2026 third and PJ Walker. So very happy with that trade. I'm going to stash him on my bench, and hopefully he will turn out next year as a good wide receiver.
Yeah, I mean he's got an opportunity, so we'll see.
Yeah, and he's on the Bills' offense with Josh Allen. I mean, how can you not want a piece of that? But so moving on, Warren, who's your first trade target?
So for me, it's Drake London. I know that offense is a lot of people are frustrated with Bijan, especially.
I think Matt Heye is number one. I think you're the president of the Arthur Smith hate club on Facebook, right?
President, owner, CFO, you name it. We talked about it last night with Richie and Chris.
But yeah, so rightfully so. But for Drake London, he's a guy who's starting to get more targets in the system. Again, he has a minimum of 6 targets in every game this season, except for game 1, which he only had 1. I'm not sure what happened there, but and his last 3 weeks, he had 9 catches on 12 targets 3 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, he had 6 catches on 7 targets, and then last week 5 catches on 7 targets. So, the target share is there, and he's catching most of the balls that are thrown to him. And I think with Ritter, being benched this week, I think it could ultimately help him, get even more targets, get more yardage out of those targets and receptions that he's getting, because Heineke likes to sling the ball down the field. He liked to do it last year with Washington. He got the ball to McLaurin and Dotson down the field, and I think it could help London even more. Not as many touchdowns as you'd like to see out of him this year, but again, I think that goes up as the season goes on, personally. And yeah, a lot of people are frustrated with Kyle Pitts too. So
yeah,
Joe?
I agree with you 100%. I think now's your time to buy low on Drake London before he starts getting more points or lows. low is in terms of his value.
Yeah.
I miss Heineke so much in Washington because I am a Dotson owner and very frustrated. I'm sure McLaurin owners are as well with Fat Baker Mayfield, aka Sam Howell. But yeah, I 100% agree. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how low you're gonna be able to get him because I feel like the people that have him have been waiting and waiting for his opportunity, and they're holding on to that. But lower than what he was worth last year, I think.
Right.
So
You could probably get him for like a second and like a decent player, maybe.
yeah, you'll need to give a player back plus at least a second. If not, are you trading a late first for him? Because I
Yeah,
think I
I
would.
mean, yeah, probably I would.
So Drake London has him valued at around a 2024 mid first is around equal. So yeah, like mid to late first of this
Sounds
year.
about right.
You could also some other things that are equal are like Saquon Barkley or T Higgins.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, that segues into my guy. T. Higgins is going to be my trade target for Dynasty. Right now, he's on the Bengals. Obviously, it's a high-powered offense led by Mr. Joe Burrow. Yes, I understand that Jamar Chase is there, and that doesn't seem to matter too much for some wide receivers, where they can have an alpha number one, and the number two is still really good. AJ Brown is the alpha in the Eagles. Last year, him and Devontae Smith both finished inside the top 12. So it can be done, and that's the potential here. Now, this is the last year T. Higgins is on this team. I don't think they can re-sign him financially. They're going to need to let him walk or take a lower deal, but I do think T. Higgins has earned a big payday. He's coming off two back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons and three straight 100-plus target seasons. Two of those have been with Jamar Chase. So you can't say, oh, well, Jamar Chase is taking away everything because he's not. Right now, he's going to be somewhere else. And any other team, you put him on any other team, minus maybe a couple, he's the number one wide receiver on that team. So looking at next year, the landscape, that's where I'm looking at for T. Higgins. Get him now. He still helps you now. The next year, he could be the number one guy with a little bit less competition. Hopefully he goes to a team that doesn't have a Jamar Chase level talent ahead of him. And then he could be of that caliber potentially. He's been a little frustrating. I have him. He's got a couple disappearing acts. Some games he just goes out. He's been injured a little bit more too, so that's part of the concerns, which that helps you buy him a little bit cheaper. So, you guys agree with T. Higgins? Like, where do you guys value him?
I do agree in the fact that right now is probably the lowest you can buy T Higgins for in the landscape of things. My one concern with him is his injury. He's very injury prone. I don't think I've ever seen him finish a season without some sort of injury, missing games. But like you said, I don't think the Bengals re-sign him, like you said, and it depends on what team he goes to. But there are some teams I'd be very excited for him to go to. One of those being the Patriots. They are like there's. If you ask me to name a good wide receiver on that team, I'd have to look up who's even on the team outside of Juju. It's not very good over there, and I think that the Patriots are going to look to improve a lot of things for next year. But yeah, I would trade for T Higgins if you can get him for the low. What do you think, Ward?
Yeah, I agree. Like you said, right now is probably the time to buy for him because his production this year hasn't really been there, and I think that's partly due to the Joe Burrow injury that he had early in the season. But I do think that the Bengals are starting to play a lot better now, and I think that T Higgins, his numbers will go up, and so yeah, right now is the time to get him. But yeah, I do agree that he won't be on the Bengals next year. He will be somewhere else. They just can't afford him unless they somehow part with Tyler Boyd and decide to keep Higgins instead. But
I mean, the salary cap doesn't matter.
Yeah,
it doesn't exist, but I feel like in this case it will. Like one of the teams I heard rumored to be in the hunt for Higgins is the Kansas City Chiefs. Now you put him in that offense, they are devoid of talent at the wide receiver position. You put him on that team, and sky's the limit.
Yeah,
I
no, I definitely agree.
So,
well, moving on to someone I talked about earlier, I have Jahan Dotson, wide receiver on the Washington Commanders. Us Dotson owners are very frustrated. He has not had the season he had last year, and thanks Sam Howell. You could trade. Keep Trade Cut has him valued at around the 2026 late first, or equal to like Kyron Williams. I'd be happy to trade Kyron Williams for him. I don't see the Commanders sticking with Sam Howell after the season. They don't look good. Sam Howell doesn't look good, and I see one of these new quarterbacks coming out of the draft getting there somehow. This is now the time to buy him. I'm sure Dotson owners are over there cursing Curtis Samuel out and wishing they had anyone else on their team on any other offense in the NFL. His situation's going to get better. With a new quarterback. I mean, look at what he did with Heineke. I wish he was still there, like Warren was talking about with Drake London. But I would gladly trade a late first or easily trade Kyron Williams if I could get a Jahan Dotson for next year. If you are not competing this year, what are your thoughts, Matt, on Jahan Dotson?
yeah, no, I mean, I don't know if you caught last night's episode, but we actually talked about this with the wide receivers on the Commanders. They just basically punted their defense away, so they're going to be in a lot of negative game scripts, and they're going to have to chuck the ball. So this should really help Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin. Now, this is your opportunity to buy them because after a couple weeks, we all play fantasy football. We're all very emotional. We're very biased towards the now. You put together a couple good weeks, and his value is going to come right back to where it was going into the season. So I agree. This is the time to buy him. It's still going to cost you because he is a young wide receiver on still his rookie deal. Probably going to be a Commander for a while, and it really comes down to the quarterback play. Next year, they could be in the running for Caleb Williams or some of these other guys there. So his situation could improve. This year might not really be that year, but next year and the future, I think is pretty bright for Jahan Dotson. What about you, Warren?
100%.
Yeah, I agree. I do think that Howell, like, I just don't know if there's. Do you guys think that there's room for improvement with him? Because he did just give the Eagles like a pretty tough game.
I don't know. They always have in division games, sometimes are a little hard to gauge because when you're in division, like sometimes some players just play better against certain teams, and that could be part of it. Yeah. But I don't know. I mean, I've seen enough of Sam Howell to know he is not the long-term answer. For fantasy, he's been really good. I think he's the quarterback 8, if I remember correctly. I think he's in points per game. He's put together a couple 30-plus pointers, but I don't know. Touchdowns aren't a very sticky stat in any position, let alone 4 touchdowns a game. I think back-to-back. So I don't know about that.
Yeah,
I would almost like to see if go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, fantasy like Matt was saying, fantasy point wise, he's up there. But when you're quarterbacking for a team that's 3-5, I don't think you keep that job.
It reminds me of Jameis Winston, where he doesn't care. He's just slinging the rock, getting points, but plays terrible. But you don't care in fantasy. So
yeah, I would almost like to see maybe Jacoby Brissett get a chance in there. Me being a Browns fan, I saw a lot of him last year, and he spread the ball out pretty well. He played pretty good. So I wonder if he could come in there and do the same thing like as Heineke, just kind of spread the ball out, play better than Howell.
Brissett did pull the Taylor Swift and put Amari Cooper on the map last year. So if it wasn't for him, no one would know who Amari Cooper was. Sorry, I'm not a Swiftie, so I have to get my digs in.
We'll move on. Warren, who's your second trade target?
So my second guy is he's a win now guy. You don't want to trade for this guy if you're obviously rebuilding or even close to it. But for me, it's D-Hop. obviously, start of the season with Tannehill has been a disaster for him. Then we saw a guy by the name of Will Levis come out last game, who's playing tonight actually, and D-Hop gets 3 touchdowns thrown to him from Will Levis, and they were all pretty deep bombs. Could this be like a reemergence for him? Do you guys think?
I don't know. It's one game, so I don't want to jump the gun here and be like, oh, Will Levis is great, but I mean, he looked good. How much of that was him versus the defense? Because it looked like they were kind of struggling last week. The Falcons. I don't know. I mean, we're recording the game, this episode during the game right now, so I haven't watched it yet. But
is he playing tonight? I don't even know.
He is. I'm watching it right now.
Okay. All right.
They're right, literally in the end zone, 1st and 23. But yeah, I agree with Warren's thing. I would think even if they have so they're playing the Steelers right now. The Steelers are a pretty good defense. D-Hop just caught a huge pass. Look at that. I was gonna say if D-Hop had a little bit quieter of a game this week, I would 100% be buying him if you're in a win now situation. I mean, we've seen what DeAndre Hopkins can do with all these terrible quarterbacks outside of Ryan Tannehill, because he's quite frankly, in my opinion, garbage. But yeah, I like D-Hop. I think it is the reinsurgence, as Warren said, of his fantasy career. And thank you, Mr. Mayonnaise. That's all I'm gonna say.
Oh,
it's that's another thing. How are we letting this go?
I love it. I love it.
Mayo in his coffee. I don't drink coffee.
I love it.
But
anyway, moving on, Matt. Who's your second Dynasty Trade target?
All right, so this is another one. I'm going to follow Warren here. This is going to be for contenders only. David Montgomery is currently the Dynasty RB17. Now, everyone saw them draft Jahmyr Gibbs and was like, David Montgomery, who? And Dan Campbell was like, David Montgomery is our guy. Jahmyr Gibbs, go sit down a little bit. And he came out swinging. And he's dealt with a couple injuries. So going forward, it might be a little bit less. Jahmyr Gibbs had that breakout game this week. So there could be a couple opportunities for Jahmyr Gibbs to steal away a little bit. But we do see this frequently as well in fantasy, where there's one main running back, but the second guy still does pretty good. Now, that main running back on the Lions is David Montgomery, and I don't expect that to change. David Montgomery will get the first looks. He will be the goal line back. Jahmyr Gibbs is a good guy to spell him and has great capability, as we all witnessed against the Raiders on Monday Night Football. He can do it. But the way this team is right now, they're going to give the rock to David Montgomery, and he's going to be there for a couple of years. It's going to be this tandem. Kind of similar in my mind to when we had Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram on the Saints. Both were great, but every other week it was kind of like who gets the touchdown and who gets the more receptions. Now, Jahmyr Gibbs profiles that way, but David Montgomery can also catch the ball. So it's a good spot to be in. And I also don't think it will cost you as much because of his age. He's on his second contract. They can get out in 2025 pretty easily. And he's going to cost you what, a late first? If you got a second plus maybe a player, maybe Zach Charbonnet, if you got a second plus Zach Charbonnet to a somewhat rebuilding team, that might be enough to get the deal done. So I don't know. Do you guys view David Montgomery as more of a win now only, or do you think he has a little bit of appeal for, the next, we'll say this year and 2024?
I'll let you go first, Warren, on this one.
So he's kind of a weird one to me. Because I do think that Gibbs is going to start to get more touches. But again, like you said, Montgomery, there's always going to be opportunities for Monty, whether that's on the goal line or, he's probably going to start every game. But yeah, it's just, he's kind of a weird one to me because I just don't know where he's going to, because like he does have an injury history, and I do expect his touches to go down, but I think he would be worth it for like maybe like a mid-second round pick to me to gamble on, because I do think that he'll still get a decent amount of carries this year and probably next year, just because of the way that offense is built and their scheme. But yeah, what do you think, Joe?
Yeah, Keep Trade Cut has him equal to a 2026 mid first, or Marquise Brown or Will Levis. It's a tough one with me. He's 26, which is, as we know, the running back hill, where we usually see the start of the decline in the running back category. And as Warren said, he has been injury prone. I do like trading him for a win now. If you're getting him for, I wouldn't be trading a first for him. Like Warren said, if you can get him for like a second or third, I'd be in on him for that, for a win now team. But if you're looking at a first, I think I would steer clear, just with what we've seen from Gibbs last week. Gibbs owners are celebrating, and I think it is going to cut into Montgomery's workload, which he had in the beginning of the year while Gibbs was kind of transitioning into the NFL. But I do like trading for him if the price is right. So good pick, Matt.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm looking at their stats right now. You know, Jahmyr Gibbs has been getting, when Monty's been healthy, about 12 to 15 touches a game. And Monty's been getting closer to 25-ish. Let's say we split it, 2020. I think both would do fine. Monty would lose a little bit of ceiling, but I think his floor is safe enough, especially in Dynasty. I mean, we're all hurting for running backs. So, like, everyone needs a running back. And if you're going for it this year and you got a couple injuries, or you're just hoping just to put together a full lineup every week, it could be worth it. That's all I'm saying.
Fair enough. So we have our final thought for today. It is a game of which of these late drafted running backs do you think has the best shot at staying relevant in Dynasty football? And we have a list of three late drafted running backs. So we have Kyron Williams, who was drafted in the 5th round, 2022. Dameon Pierce, drafted in the 4th round of 2022. And Jerome Ford, drafted in the 5th round of 2022. Warren, we'll start with you. Which one of these three late round running backs has the best shot of staying relevant?
Is it my personal bias, or is it like what I actually think?
I guess what you actually
both.
think. Yeah, give both. Why not?
Yeah.
Okay. My personal bias is obviously Jerome Ford, being a Browns fan. Do I honestly think that has the best shot? No. I think that they're starting to give Pierre Strong a little more carries over here, and he looks really good, along with Kareem Hunt getting back into game shape more and more. So I don't know how much he's going to be really a factor. Like a big like he'll still get his touches, but I don't know how much of a big factor he's going to be. For me, though, I think it's Kyron Williams. He just looked so good when he was in there earlier in the season. You know, he's been hurt, but when he comes back, I expect him to pretty much have the same workload he had before he went out. So for me, it's him.
What about you, Matt?
Yeah, that's where I kind of lean too. Dameon Pierce, I mean, earlier in the season, I think you poked fun at me because I had him buried in my running back rankings because I just didn't see it happening. One, I didn't think the Houston Texans were going to have an offense that was remotely good, but turns out they kind of do, and it just doesn't translate to the running back for some reason. And Kyron Williams, I know he's drafted late. I think he was actually drafted later, the latest out of this group. But the Rams offense likes that one running back. He was buried up on the depth chart last year, but behind Darrell Henderson and Cam Akers. Well, both of them got sent away. I know Henderson's back now just because Kyron's out, but at the same time, Sean McVay likes to use one single running back. I know he was drafted later, and it kind of goes against everything I've said about late drafted running backs don't hold value. But in this situation, I do think he has the highest chance to be relevant next year. And I'm not just saying that because I traded for him this year, but he does look good. He looks the part. This offense is going through a little bit of a tough time. You know, Matt Stafford is injured, but they have Cooper Kupp, they have Puka. They seem pretty good. We were all a little bit concerned about how they were going to look because it was just going to be Cooper Kupp, but they actually look pretty good. Now we'll see, but I don't know. I mean, Dameon Pierce for me is just he's going to go away. Devin Singletary is taking touches away from him, so that's never a good thing.
He's also
what about
injured.
you, Joe?
Well, he's injured. That's why.
Well, this week. Well, what about the rest of the season?
Out of the three, it's real tough. I'd have to go with Dameon Pierce. I mean, he had a monster rookie season last year, and they didn't. He kind of showed that he is a good running back for them, and they didn't bring in any other running backs come this season, which I was very surprised. Kyren Williams looked really good, but he's a small running back, and he's a 5th-round pick. I mean, none of these guys have a shot at staying relevant. Any team could move on from them, and it wouldn't cost them anything because they spent such a late-round pick on these guys. But out of the three, Jerome Ford, I think looks good. But like Warren said, he's splitting Kareem Hunt's there, who we know is an elite talent. And Nick Chubb, I'm sure, will be back with a vengeance. So my money's on Chubb coming back and being a dominant force again. Kyren Williams looks good right now, but again, smaller running back. I think his role is going to be a little more limited. Where Dameon Pierce, I think, has the best shot out of the three of being if I had to trade for one of them, I'd rather trade for Pierce out of the three. But
I think Pierce holds the most value out of everyone here.
Yeah, I agree.
That's kind of where it is. Whether he deserves it or not is another question. But I do think out of these three, he holds the most value. You can still get a return from him.
I agree with that. But
yeah, it's weird. Like you said earlier with CJ Stroud, Matt. I don't think the Texans were really expecting Stroud to be as good as he was, and I think that's kind of taken away, some of the run game, aspect of them, and I think that's part of the reason why his numbers haven't really been there so far this year. But
yeah. I mean, I thought CJ Stroud, like I saw a good NFL quarterback when I was scouting CJ Stroud in the offseason. I just didn't expect this. With this wide receiver room, this offensive line that is been playing better, but like opening the season, like they were terrible. And it didn't matter. So it's a really weird year. I know we say that a lot, but it's another very weird, bizarre year where things just don't make sense sometimes.
Yeah, Stroud looks amazing out of the rookie class. I mean, Will Levis last game looked good, but Bryce Young is struggling. Anthony Richardson is dying every game. So out of the class, I think Stroud is the guy. So, but
still holding out hope.
That's gonna do it for us over here at the Heroes of Fantasy Football podcast. Check out our website, www.theheroesff.com. Go ahead and go on there, ask us some questions. We'll answer them on the next show. And listen to us anywhere, Apple Music, Spotify. We're on YouTube. Warren's going to be joining us on more episodes. Chris is going to be joining us on more episodes. And I might have a special guest for Monday's waiver episode. So stay tuned, and thanks for watching.
Is it Taysom Hill?
Spoiler, it might not be. It might be Taysom Hill.
Oh,
well, fine. You gotta tune in and see.
All right. So long, everyone.
See you later, guys.
Thank you again for tuning in to another episode of the Heroes of Fantasy Football podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the Heroes FF.